All right, today we are looking at section 1.2, algebraic expressions. Our objective is to evaluate and simplify algebraic expressions. Much like the last lesson, I expect a lot of this to be review, but hopefully it makes it an easy lesson just to give you a good refresher. All right, a variable is a symbol used to represent one or more numbers. Normally it's a letter, okay? It could be any sort of symbol, but normally it's a letter. What's the most common letter we see used as a variable? X. Ooh, let me see. Y would be the second most common. There, that white ink is better.
I can't see what you wrote down at all.
Can you see the X? This says normally a letter. Most of that's already on your notes. Just have to work the letter in. All right, an algebraic or variable expression is an expression that contains one or more variables. So I think that last blank is down here. So for example, on those, we could have something as simple as 3x. That's a variable expression. Has a variable in it. Another example would be something like a plus b, multiple variables involved. You could have 5xy squared minus 10. Pretty much any sort of expression you see, regardless of how many terms and how many variables, those are all algebraic or variable expressions. Okay, when we evaluate an expression, we have to remember to follow our order of operations. You have them listed out there as a refresher. Okay, again, nothing new. We've done this before. We have to remember to do multiplication and division in order from left to right. Same thing with addition and subtraction. So multiplication does not always come before division. Addition does not always come before subtraction. Start recording. So our first step to evaluate is going to be to substitute in the values for our variables, and then we'll simplify it using our order of operations. So I'm first going to rewrite number 1, plugging in 4 for the x's. So 4 plus and negative 2 for the y. Notice how I put the negative 2 in parentheses. That's not because I'm multiplying it. That's just to separate the negative sign from my addition sign. So I rewrite the problem, plugging everything in. Then we go to our order of operations. The first thing I want to do is negative 2 divided by 4. Division comes first before addition. Negative 2 divided by 4 is what? Negative 1/2. So I have 4 plus negative 1/2. If you were to instead write it as, I'll just put this in a bubble off to the side, 4 plus negative 0.5. That's the same thing. Those are interchangeable. Either one works. Okay. Either way we do it, what do we end up with? Good. Positive 3.5 or positive 3.5. 3.5, that's the same as 3.5. Again, I'm not going to be terribly picky about how you write your answers. You could also write it as 7/2, 7/2. That's the same thing also. If I'm going to be picky about how you write your answers, I'll let you know. Okay. Questions on number 1? Okay. I'm not a huge fan of how this slide is set up because it doesn't give me room for my big writing, but we're going to do our best. So my first step is going to be to plug in x and y into number 2. When I do that, I went over this with my freshman this morning. Does this 3x turn into 34? No. I've got to put in there that I'm definitely multiplying that. So I need parentheses around it or a multiplication dot in between those. Something that tells me I'm multiplying. Okay, same thing here. I see a lot of people turn this into a 4 minus 2. That's not right. That is 4 times y, so 4 times negative 2. Plus 4 minus negative 2 again. Are we all okay with substituting in? Okay, then we start evaluating. What's the first thing I could, should, want to do? The multiplication. And I can do both of these multiplications at the same time, working from left to right. Okay, so 3 times 4 is 12. And then what was this turn into?
Plus 8.
Good. We can treat that as a negative 4 times negative 2 if you want to. It becomes a positive 8 or plus 8. Otherwise, you're subtracting a negative. Again, you still end up adding. I'm going to leave that plus 4 alone. There's nothing really happening there. Instead of subtracting negative 2, how could I write it?
Plus 2.
As adding 2. Very good. Now, all of this is addition, so I just add them all together, preferably from left to right, but it's all addition, so it's commutative. What did we come up with? 26. Was that a question, or were you going to give the answer? Okay, I thought I saw a hand up.
No, I was about to ask you something.
All right, again, plug it in. Use parentheses when it's necessary or helpful. 4 plus 2 times 4 divided by negative 2 minus 2 times negative 2. Wow, I wrote way too big. That's okay. What am I going to want to do first? Okay, we need to do this multiplication first. This one I'm going to kind of do one step at a time. Are we all okay if I erase some of this up here? To give myself, okay, let me give myself a little more space. I'm just going to erase all that. So we'll drag that up to the top and start working on it up here. Okay, so you said multiplication first. So 4 plus 8. I'm going to copy the rest of the problem down for now. Just because I don't want to do too much at once. We'll just do one thing at a time. What should I do next? Divide. Very good. So we need to do this division. Again, the 4 plus isn't changing yet. 8 divided by negative 2 is good. A positive divided by a negative is a negative 4 minus 2 times negative 2. What next? Good. We can multiply this back here. So that ends up becoming a plus 4. We've got negative times a negative or subtracting a negative. Either way, this comes out as adding 4. Now we've just got all addition here, right? Even though we're adding a negative, we've got all addition. 4 plus negative 4. What?
I mean 0.
Okay, good. It's all right. So then we really just end up with 4. Okay. So these ones, we practice with a partner. Okay, so we still should have plugged in and followed our order of operations. We'll discuss them as needed. The important one to remember on all of these is that if you square a negative, it becomes a positive. Okay, the exception to that's going to be down here. you're squaring a positive and then taking the opposite of it, right? So down here, this should have started off with a negative 25, but we'll get there. Up here on number 4, and let me know if you disagree, and we can work through it. I make mistakes too, but I got negative 14 on number 4.
How'd you get there?
I didn't want to go.
I got, so negative 3 times negative 3. Oh, is it negative?
Negative 3 times negative 3.
You guys are right. It's negative 16.
Negative 16.
Y'all both feeling slow.
So, hold on. So, since that's a... never mind. That's supposed to be a minus sign. I mean, a negative sign. I thought that was a negative sign, too.
There's a minus sign here.
Yeah,
So we plug this in, negative times a negative, that comes out to be a
You said 5 was second.
positive. 5 times 5.
So when you
It's
put
25.
5 right there, that's not negative 5. And then you change that, put that negative 25.
This is just a subtraction sign.
Yeah, you
If it
tripping.
was negative 9, it'd be 34.
It would have been negative 35.
Okay, negative 34.
But a negative times a negative turns this positive. Right? That's just a subtraction sign. So we're not plugging in a negative for the D. We're plugging in a positive 5. So we get negative 16. Number 5,
This one.
I got a negative 3.
Yeah, negative 3. What'd you get?
So anybody severely disagree, think I made an error? Okay, we would have to do the parentheses first, then the exponent, then multiply, and then subtract. Any severe burning questions on number 5?
Can we go over? Yeah, I got lost. Wait, what's this?
All right, on number 6, I got negative 69.
Ooh, God.
Negative?
I'm all the way off. I got 10.
I got 69. I didn't get negative.
Okay. Okay, let's go back and talk about 5. So we plug things in. Negative 3 times 3 minus 5 minus negative 3 squared. So I'll work it out over to the side here. First thing is parentheses. 3 minus 5 is negative 2. Minus, I'm going to put that minus sign there. I'm going to go ahead and do my exponent. Negative 3 squared is 9. Next we do our multiplication. A negative times a negative is positive 6 minus 9. That's where I got that negative 3. Okay, so let's go through 6 again. Real quick. Not again, for the first time. We're going to plug everything in again. This negative has nothing to do with what's getting squared, right? So I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to square the 5 only.
Oh, so that's where I got messed up right there.
Yeah, so we're only squaring D.
What's a negative there
And
for?
D is a positive. We're then going to make it negative after we square it. Minus 4, I'm going to keep plugging in. Again, I plug in a 5 for D minus 2 times that negative 3. So I've got double parentheses out here. Again, I'm going to bring this up to the top to have a little more room here. We'll talk about this exponent again in just a second. But for now I'm going to leave it because the first thing I want to deal with is inside the parentheses.
So it's still going to be a negative 25. Alright, no, I'm tripping.
So in here we've got 5. A negative 2 times negative 3 would be
Okay, so that's what it was.
plus 6. Are we okay with that? Once we get inside the parentheses, we kind of have to start over with our order of operations. So that's why we have to do the multiplying the minus 2 times negative 3 first. Now we can add inside our parentheses, so I'm still not dealing with this exponent yet. 5 plus 6 is 11. The 5 is what I got when I plugged in the D. Minus 2 times my C. C was negative 3. When I multiplied the minus 2 times the negative 3, I would end up with minus negative 6 or just plus 6. The 5 is still just getting carried down from when I plugged it in. All right, now this is the part people don't like. We had the negative D squared. D was positive, D is getting squared. So it's still going to be positive, right, at first? But then we have the opposite or the negative sign out in front. So 5 times 5 is 25, then I make it negative. So we do have a negative 25 out in front. And then here we've got minus 4 times 11, which is 44. We subtract from a negative, it becomes more negative. That's how I got the minus 69.